Greeting, this is Ron from the Encyclopedia team. It is with great honor we have Veronika Belousova for this interview. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much, Ron, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here today.
So, Veronika, before we dive in, our readers would love to get to know you a bit better. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so here I represent the Laboratory for Economics of Innovation. We study different types of actors, and we mostly focus on the behavioral strategies in respect to the sustainable development. And so our laboratory is a division within a larger research institute, which is called Institute for Statistical Studies and Economics of Knowledge, where we mostly focus our research on foresight studies, STI measurement, and STI policy. And so this is the lab agenda, how the climate influence on behavioral strategies of STI actors. So this is like the topic which we would like to discuss today in respect to these greenhouse gases emission strategies. And so I have a PhD in banking and finance, and within the lab, I'm a head deputy. So this is like shortly about myself.
Thank you for providing your background. So, your recent paper talked about coping with greenhouse gas emissions, insights from digital business service. Could you please briefly introduce the aim of this research? Can you first share the key findings of your research as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. That you think that this topic is interesting to look at. Let me get started maybe just to first describe what we mean by greenhouse gas emissions, and then I will move to the digital business services and explain why we think that this topic is good to explore and what we try to contribute to the research agenda. So greenhouse gases contribute to global warming by absorbing net heat energy. And maybe you know that within the most prominent greenhouse gases, um, like carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor, yeah? But maybe for the carbon dioxide, you heard more than for the rest of the gases, but evidently all three gases are very important. Because so it's believed that the primary driver for climate change is established within this set of gases. And why we believe that this is important issue to study. So let me give you two examples from the European perspective. So within the European Union, Copernicus climate change services showed that now it's very boring to study greenhouse gases emissions because 2 years ago, I mean like 2015 and 2020, there was the warmest on the record. Yeah. And if we go back to the International Energy Agency, then we will find out that CO2 emissions were momentarily reduced by the COVID-19, but this is not like the case for 2021 because it's redundant to the highest historical level, like approximately 36 trillion tons. It means that 6% higher compared to 2020. And this is like, the mostly important issue for the humans because humans are considered as a driver for such emissions due to the increased use of coal. So why we decided to switch to the digital business services? You might ask such a question because definitely this is not manufacturing or dairy industries, yeah, or even not transport. So we believe that within the literature, yeah, definitely the main emitters like manufacturing, extractive industries, and services such as transport, they got a lot of attention from researchers how to cope with emissions. But for the digital business services, they are underexplored. So within that category services, we mainly consider digital business consultancy, advertising, and ICT services. So why we decided to study this type of services? Because we believe that they might be an engine to sustainability practices, which might help other companies cope with this challenge. So we find that digital business services firms take a wide range of environmental initiatives, and we focus on the firms that achieve higher than average sustainability score to explore these initiatives. And maybe, if possible, I just highlight three key results which we find out, just to give you an example how this experience might be um, important and very helpful to other industries as well. So within the key findings, we found that digital business companies are actively setting greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, mainly through three set of activities like reduce waste, reduce the resources to be used, and to design environmental innovations. I will give you a couple of examples just to illustrate how it works within the digital business services, namely, for example, for reducing waste. So it includes e-waste, I mean, through the all this digital, kind of environments which we live in, yeah. And it also includes like how to make people use transportation in a more effective way. For example, Nielsen reduces its consumption of papers and recycles or even reuses electronic equipment. And other actions like which related to resource use. So it includes switching to renewable energy sources as well, what we observe in manufacturing or extractive industries, green building solutions, and importantly, like management of supply chain, which are very important to establish the procedures which help to manage scope 3, yeah, which are mostly established for the supply chain activities. And in that respect, let me give you a big producer, Microsoft. Yeah, so Microsoft now seeks the way how to decrease supply chain emission and invest in carbon removal projects in that field of even forestry, soil, bioenergy, direct air capture. This is like a wide spread of technologies to be used in that respect. And finally, so for the design of environmental innovations. So this is mostly includes digital products, solutions which help industry digitalize, decarbonize. And again, I would like to give an example of Microsoft because they established a new sustainable calculator, which helps to assess the emissions and how the clients might, be flexible and adaptive to the emission reduction targets due to, let's say, cloud services and other frameworks, and now for assess the carbon emissions. And what is more importantly, that even the environmental innovations are highly connected to resource use. And in that respect, so Microsoft provides this cloud services based on so-called renewable energy. And then it makes that the services which you other utilize now might be, assessed as carbon-free somehow. So like shortly, I try to sum this up. So we believe that digital business services might be very interesting to look further, and even in respect to environmental regulations, because definitely they established good practices to reduce waste, including e-waste, to manage resources effectively, and design a very prominent environmental innovations which support sustainable development of industries and, more importantly, countries as a whole.
Thank you so much for clarifying the relationship between greenhouse emissions and digital business services. So, what difficulties did you encounter in your research and how did you resolve them?
Yeah, maybe you might acknowledge, yeah, when I provided the examples, this is the key players, yeah, even for ICT industries, or even more if we consider like advertising, consultancy, yeah. So, and this is a kind of a limitation of our study as well, because our results are mostly reflected by the best practices of large digital business services. And and this is a kind of difficulty, yeah, why we decided to focus on that industries instead of small and medium enterprises. We did that because we have more, you know, disclose the information within this range of companies than for SMEs, for example. But definitely, if we consider decarbonization and carbon, the target on being carbon neutral, then it's difficult. It's very important to study other companies which also contribute to that target achievement. And in that way, so we also should not let alone consumer services which are not covered by our study yet, but definitely there are more practices might be established in that respect. Because here we might also observe populations which or like citizens, yeah, I mean, in that like retail customers who care about the environment, and then we might also take into account their, a kind of behavioral patterns, right? So, we also think that meanwhile we have some benefits to study digital business services because we examine the activities which are highly depend on expert knowledge and more concerned with transforming data on information, a kind of knowledge sharing, yeah, than the transforming raw materials and physical products. But definitely in that respect, when we talk about the real sector, yeah, definitely we also need to figure out the kind of assessment of their production processes and technologies which are vital nowadays. That's why, so just to sum this up, definitely we have difficulties in selecting the companies which our focus um, should be. But at the same time, we acknowledge that there are more even practices across other industries which we have not covered yet, but definitely ESG regulation will be touched upon. Even it is fragmented in developed countries, but we expect that the harmonization will occur between industries at least. And definitely, yeah, not like one size fits all approach might work here. That's why we just get started from digital business services, and we hope that our initiative will be followed up by other researchers just to have a more comprehensive picture in that respect.
So, what do you think of the development of greenhouse gas emissions in the future?
Yeah, that's I would say that question is a kind of challenging. Yeah, now I mean I mostly can reflect what has been invented so far, but definitely the future is not so, I would say, bright. We need a kind of some foresight study just to be sure about some kind of scenario planning. But so the process of decarbonization will be likely continued, stated by the UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties in November 2021. Yeah. And so we expect that it will be in place across different industries and countries. And definitely the world is already experiencing problems related to climate change, right? So to avoid the worst climate scenarios, emission would peak by 2025, half past 2030, and continue to decline. But so how to react to that, how to be stable across all that conditions, that's an open question, definitely. And but it's a kind of sense of urgency. And the COVID-19 pandemic showed that government can act rapidly, and some STI policy supports this sustainable development growth across different countries. And we definitely expect that in that way we might, progress in within the process of decarbonization. Just to give you a couple of again examples from a kind of consultants which we study. So like PwC, they showed that 60% of the world's largest public companies have set commitment to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, and this is likely to grow. But how to assess the digits? Yeah, again, a kind of measurement issue. And I previously mentioned that like there is a room for scope 3 measurement, like a scope to measure scope 3 in an effective way. But what now we can say that scope 1 let me just briefly describe what I mean by scope one. So this is like scope one emissions, which are direct greenhouse emissions. So it means that it occurs from sources that are controlled by owned by organization, yeah, within the production process. And scope two, this is like indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated mostly with the purchased energies, electricity, heat, or cooling. So, and scope three, as I said before, this is mostly for supply chain activities. So mainly meaning that activities from assets not owned or controlled by the company which reports about these emissions, but that indirectly affect its value chain. Yeah, this is a more complex way to assess the scope three. So, and definitely would be observed. So scope one and scope two might be under control of at least large companies, and they do account the emissions at that level. But definitely scope three, this is a kind of promising area to explore. And it seems that digital business services might be a driver for that transformation, which might also help establish the procedure within the value chain, how to measure scope three and how to hedge companies out of these greenhouse gas emissions. And maybe like finally to figure out like how this topic is important across different perceptions within the digital business services. So let me give you another example, like Edison Young. So within that, so decarbonization strategies, according to the estimation, will push even major emitters such as manufacturing, oil, and mining companies to shift their behavior, definitely. And this process will require substantial cost. So, for example, McKinsey showed that $21 trillion through 2050 might be needed to cope with that. I would say a kind of target set. And like financing of the European Green Deal, like stimulate that the European Union might even reach climate neutrality by 2050 requires an enormous investment, so around 1 trillion euro, both from public and private sectors. And this means that we expect that not just companies might cooperate, but there is a huge growth of cooperation between science and business, just to figure out the effective way to restrict climate change, which are very important for our civilization.
I sure hope we as human beings will stop digging our own graves, right? So before we finish, is there any acknowledgement you would like to make?
Yeah, I would like to thank my co-authors who helped in this very interesting, I would say, journey to figure out new insights and thinking how we might help jointly being like the representatives of academia help business cope with that very important challenge. And would also thank my university for supporting such initiatives because, even our research center provides some funds to run the field study, which also help us to figure out the key insights across companies, not like based on the annual reports, which we use for this particular research, yeah, but like the survey data, which also help us um, figure out the practices for encouraging the sustainable development across different industries. So in that way, I would also thank those who care about the environment, because this is like people, organizations, and companies, I believe, help to cope with such a global challenge, which if we combine our efforts, definitely we can create something very a kind of important initiatives, which I fully believe, which will be fully supported by policymakers as well.
We wish you and your fellow colleagues the best of luck on your future research. And thank you again for joining us, Veronica.
Thank you so much, Ron. It's a great pleasure to be here and just to have such a very friendly and open talk.
Thank you.